Hello and welcome to a quick little video for Dominion 6. I wanted to go ahead and take a look at a new Sabbath option, which is available now to us in Dominion 6, and I think is very thematic, so please don't patch it out of existence, Illwinter. I want to talk today about pain transfer Sabbaths. So the basic idea here is you're going to Sabbath up with all your blood mages, and then you're going to have one of those blood mages. You know, you have a couple. The idea is to have usually about 2 blood slaves, and everybody else will be masters for that +1 boost. You can do it with 4, but it'll cost more. But the idea is to cast this pain transfer spell. And what this will do is wounds taken by a mage will be transferred to blood slaves that are nearby. And when you are in a Sabbath or a communion and people are casting too much and they put you over that 200 fatigue, you start taking damage. With pain transfer, that damage gets moved onto the blood slaves. So in effect, you can keep your communion or your Sabbath of just 2 mages alive for a tremendously long amount of time using just blood slaves. And it can be a bit blood slave intensive, but sometimes you need all your mages to be casting spells and you don't have enough to be putting them into a more stable kind of Sabbath. So that's the basic idea, and I went ahead and recorded a couple of little tests. If it'll load. Let's see. Not that one. We'll look at that one in a second. I feel like I called it Sabbath testing or something. This one. Okay. So what I did here is I went ahead and I scripted 3 battles against just some Chaosophy, and the results of the battles don't really matter here. One of these is using the Pain Transfer Communion. One of them is using a Fire Gem and Conjuration 3 to put themselves up into fire. We're casting only fireballs here, which obviously the spell itself doesn't matter. We want it to be consistent, at least while we're scripted. So we're casting fireballs. And then the last one is doing a more stable communion. It's 4/4, although that's not really that stable, but it's more standard, I suppose. To make it stabler, you need probably even fewer masters. But anyway, the point here is we're gonna go ahead and we're just attacking into like 50 PD, I think. So they all did a Phoenix Power. So this is primarily aimed at sort of a little bit more early game scenarios where you may have some blood income. Maybe it's like a passive blood income like Alanka or Veritas that you haven't put to use any other way yet. And you need to try and take a big fight, or maybe you're doing a little bit of blood hunting, but you haven't gotten everything going. And so you've researched, Patreon. In this case, though, you haven't, right? This is where you've gone for Conjuration 3. So you've got Conjuration 3, Evocation 3. And so what we want to do here is sort of count the number of fireballs we get out. So that's 4. And this, by the way, costs 8 fire gems. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. And we're going to start marching forwards. See, everybody's pretty high on fatigue. Some of them are fatigued out, which is why we're getting this split. These guys just happened to cast their spells a little bit earlier, I think, and they recovered. These mages are still busy doing nothing. We get 4 more. And then these guys are going to pass out. 113, 108. They were on round 6. The second group that was passed out is now marching forwards. And these guys, I think, have mostly routed. We might get a couple more. No, they're not going to make it in range. So, they cast like 25 or something. They cast a pretty good amount of fireballs before essentially fatiguing out and then only waking up a little bit later. This is our Pain Transfer Sabbath. So all of these used 8 mages. In this case, we're using 6 as masters and 2 as the Sabbath slaves. You can see I've given them a bunch of blood slaves, and somebody here is going to cast Pain Transfer. Everything else is theoretically the same. It's the same amount of PD. It's the same amount of troops. Although again, the victory or defeat is not really relevant. So here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somebody just didn't want to cast it, I guess. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, I think I may have seen an 11 in there. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. You can see they're just over, but they always go over by, 2 or 3, and then they're ready to go again. You can see they all came out at the same time. In this case, it looks like we may have had better fireball hits and routed them quicker. So we didn't end up getting quite as many fireballs off. But you can see all the mages are walking forwards to keep casting, whereas the other mages had gone to sleep. There we get a couple more friendly firearm guys. And you can see most of our blood slaves back here are actually still alive. We'll watch it again real quick just to watch that part. And so you can actually see it sort of going off. So there goes the Sabbath slave. And you can see that was the pain transfer. And so you see little ones popping up. But all of those are getting transferred onto the blood slaves instead. So our guys actually, despite being at full fatigue, are completely healthy. So I think this one cost us like 2 or 3 extra slaves. And again, that one is gonna hold up pretty well. You guys are not gonna fatigue out. This is a 4 and 4 split, so this costs the fewest slaves, and they're gonna get a pretty good number of fireballs up as well. But you've spent more mages not doing anything, and they're starting to get fatigued out. Now we are gonna win this one before it gets it's too far. But in a longer fight, these guys would have actually ended up dying just from these four. Or at least taking damage, maybe taking afflictions. Maybe they wouldn't have died. And you can do other stuff too. Obviously, you can reinvigorate to reduce the threat. I didn't want to script like some giant fight that's going to go to round 20. But the basic idea here is the pain transfer community will last longer than the other types. Generally, obviously, well, the first one obviously doesn't have an issue with lasting as long. It just doesn't. They fatigue out. So the other one I wanted to show is one quick video. So that one I used all fire mages, which is sort of the best case scenario for casting fireball. But the obviously, if you don't have, if you're in a more realistic scenario as someone like Baratos, you're not going to have all fire mages. You're going to have a mixture. And the first communion with all the fire mages. If you don't have those fire mages, right, your air mages are not going to cast lightning bolts or anything useful at that tech level because there's no storm available. Your earth mages have nothing useful to do either. So in general, your blood mages also don't have anything to do from a mass evocation perspective, and so none of them help. In our pain transfer communion, you can boost those air mages to cast lightning bolt. The earth mages still need a little more research before they're doing any much in the way of big evocations, but those earth mages and those blood mages can be used as the pain transfer Sabbath slave. And it doesn't matter how much fatigue a spell costs or would do, it always deals 1 point of damage per spell, whether it's Fireflies or Thunderstrike. And so the fact that you're doing it completely off path only adds a little bit, it only accelerates the process of getting to those slaves a little bit faster. It really doesn't change it too much. So you can sort of better make use of the whole buffalo of your mages. Don't click host, that would be bad. So in this one, it's a little bit more like that. I added a lot more mages. You can see we've got 4, 8, 12, and there are some air mages in here as well. And then just 2 guys with a bunch of blood slaves. This is against 75 PD. So they're going to use up all their blood slaves. Go ahead and Sabbath up. They're going to do the same thing. Somebody cast pain transfer. And then we'll go ham. And so you can see, we're right at 195. They actually did take a little bit of damage here before the pain transfer went off, and this guy got muted. I don't know if that's... I have to double check if Pain Transfer is a longer cast time. But it wasn't enough to stop them, and now all this damage gets funneled into the Blood Slaves. And all these mages get a whole path boost, and essentially have very little in the way of fatigue problems at the cost of a bunch of Blood Slaves and just 2 mages not casting. Which is pretty hard to pull off, and now they're off script, so they're gonna do some dumb stuff, but, well, you know, what are you gonna do about that? See, a lot of Blood Slaves still alive as well, and finally it looks like we're gonna win. And banishment. Who are we banishing? There's one skeleton. Okay. But the point here, right, is we were able to get a huge number of casters buffed and useful with just a couple of Sabbath slaves and a lot of Blood Slaves. So it's kind of a unique little strategy to, in a pinch, right, because it is very expensive. Each spell costs 1 HP per Sabbath slave. So like if you're using 4 Sabbath slaves, it costs twice as many Blood Slaves as using 2. Each one costs 1 per Sabbath slave. So each spell with this 2-person setup, you're gonna get 5 spells, a little bit less, a little bit less than 5 spells per Blood Slave, because each Blood Slave has 9 HP. You can do stuff like put the Blood Slaves in the corners, and that'll cause them to deal 1 damage to each Blood Slave, instead of when they're together they deal it to the same one every time, and it has a chance of keeping 1 extra slave alive, but it's not like terribly relevant. But yeah, for a nation like Baratos, who's got these Baraton priests that don't function very well in combat without either a Sabbath or a gem commitment, this can be a good way to get an awful lot of them fighting early on. It could also work, obviously any Blood Nation can do it, but a lot of them have better things to do. You know, if you're playing like a Hinnom, you're probably not going to bother with this, because you can just, you know, you can much more easily put regen on like a Kohen and do like a turbo communion that way. There's no reason to do this, but something like a Xibalba could go kind of ham with skeletons, using like their Kamazats. Miklin's kind of cap only, but they can do this. Obviously, it's much worse on nations like Vanheim, right? You know, if you're gonna have your Van Jarl is your, you know, 2 Van Jarls as your Sabbath slaves is 880 gold, as opposed to Baratos does it for, you know, 400. But it works for something like them too. Blood slaves are probably a little more precious for them in general as well. They don't have quite as good blood hunters. But, you know, Abyssia, lots of nations. Peren probably has better things to do, like Eme Peren, when they can bring their Acro belts with them. But you can pull something like this off with, you know, flying in with your Sergina. So there's a lot of really interesting options. It's more of an early game strategy. Once you get into the mid game, those Blood Slaves, or maybe even late mid game, but those Blood Slaves surviving long enough to pull this off does go down. You know, they're gonna get killed by other various miscellaneous effects, you know, your foul vapors, etc., that your opponents cast. But for kind of an early mid game, little way to get extra juice out of some mages who might otherwise struggle to contribute, it's a neat little tactic. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that one out there. I recently used it in a game and it went pretty well, so thought I'd go ahead and share. If anybody know, and again, there's some math I haven't done here, right? When does it make sense to have somebody cast Reinvigoration? You know, at what mage count does that make sense, etc. But yeah, if anybody has any other, you know, neat little Sabbath or communion tricks, feel free to go ahead and, you know, put those down in the comments. I have a couple others I'm saving. I might do some more videos on Sabbaths and communions. I do think that they're one of the more unique and fun mechanics in Dominions. So hopefully look out for those in the near future. But Anyway, thanks for sticking with me and have a great day.